Today's episode is being brought to you by Gem City Fine Foods. They are a completely gluten-free and nut-free baking facility, and their desserts are incredible. I challenge you to tell the difference between some other big box brand and the desserts that these guys make. Even though they're gluten-free and even though they're nut-free and in some cases dairy-free, they are not flavor-free. Moist, delicious desserts delivered to your door. Find them at gemcityfinefoods.com. Why do we cook? We cook for food, for family, and for friends. We cook to bring people together.
Honey, that looks good. Pardon my fork.
Hello and welcome to Pardon My Fork. This is Andy, and I got a special guest in the second chair. Corianne is joining me. You know her as the voice of the Pardon My Fork girl. Yes, that is her voice in the intro music, and I was very fortunate to have her do that for me. I get a lot of compliments on my intro music, and a lot of that comes down to you, babe.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you never told me that. That's pretty special.
Yeah.
Thanks,
oh, yeah.
Honey.
And of course, she is a foodie through and through. She's the one that got me into this whole thing. And so having her here is second nature. It comes very naturally.
I am really glad that I could be here. We got to try some fun cheeses recently.
Before we roll into the cheeses, I got to talk about what we had for dinner because it's a little bit later when we're recording this, but oh man, we had these sausages and I don't think they were anything special. They were just a Johnsonville broad or something, right?
They were an all-pork Johnsonville beer bratwurst.
Beer bratwurst.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what beer goes into it. Like, I wonder if they use it as the emulsifying liquid or if it's like a beer powder. You know what I mean?
Beer powder.
Well, I don't know. What's that yeast I'm thinking of? I always want to say Tortuga.
The brewer's yeast is the yellow yeast that's high in B vitamins. Or are you thinking of the yeast that they put on toast in Australia?
No, not that Vegemite stuff. No. Nope.
I give you $20 to eat that.
I've heard that it's much better on toast and you're not supposed to eat it like straight out of the can. I've been told that is the general mistake that Americans make with Vegemite is they just dip a finger into it and taste it.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't do that. People can do that with caviar, of course, but I think the casual person coming by and trying caviar for the first time shouldn't do that, right?
No, they should definitely have caviar with a good French spread, maybe some brie cheese,
and I'm not
saying
champagne. We shouldn't tart the Vegemite up for all of that. I'm just saying put it on some dry toast or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, and a quarter of the globe loves Vegemite, so America's just needs to come along, I guess.
Right. Recently, I had a conversation with the only Baijiu distiller in the United States. Mm-hmm. That's going to be for our new show coming up called Barrel Age Podcast. I've talked about it a few times. We're a couple weeks out from that. But Vin Distilling is the only Baijiu distillery in the country.
Yes.
And we had a conversation about that, how they just don't really understand why Baijiu is not a thing in America.
It's the number one spirit in the world.
It's the number one spirit among Asian countries, which represent an enormous population of the world.
Yeah, I would say so.
So, I mean, there is that.
More than half.
It's like when you say it's the most popular liquor in the world, that just means everyone in China drinks it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, China has a lot of drinkers. I mean, communism, it's kind of depressing, Baijiu.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look at their architecture, right? They live in caves to get away from it.
No, that's terrible. Oh my God.
Once upon a time, I wanted to be an architect, and that's the whole reason why I'll make the weird building jokes every once in a while. But no, the sausages that we smoked today.
We went from sausages to Vegemite to Baijiu to caves in China. I don't know where we went, but the sausages were really good. Oh,
that's how Pardon My Fork works, by the way.
Beer emulsifier, the sausages. That's what happened. Beer powder. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where we went.
Now we're caught up.
Now we're caught up. So the cool thing that I'm really excited about is twofold. One, my birthday was this summer, and Andy got me a fermentation kit, which I'm a giant dork, but it allows me to make my own fermented vegetables such as sauerkraut.
And this thing's not just a crock, by the way. The crock is a great way to go, and we've been using them for centuries, obviously. But I saw this kit at a local, it's called Urban Ag here in Albany, Oregon. And it's a big, just about a gallon mason jar looking thing, and a rubber cap that goes on that forms a perfect seal. And then there's a trap, an air trap. You help me out. What are those things called? You put a little water in it, and then things can bubble out, but nothing from the outside can get in, which of course you need when you're making sauerkraut for reasons that the doctor is going to let us know now.
Well, so fermented foods are gaining a lot of popularity in the foodie world because not only they have an amazing umami flavor component, but also they're very healthy for us because of the beneficial microbes that are found in fermented foods. And the scientific industry, the research world is exploding with all this new information about how our gut microbes influence our health and well-being. So if you have a healthy gut, you will have a healthy body for the most part. Your gut microbiome, or the environment, the homeostasis that exists inside your intestines, is responsible for controlling your vitamin K levels, which you need for blood clotting, for the balance of dopamine and epinephrine in your brain.
Is it true that more of that is produced in the gut than even in the brain?
They're working on that. I'm not going to say that's definitive, but there's research coming out that there's a significant amount of hormones and neurotransmitters produced in the microflora and the biome that live in your intestines. Now, they also influence your pH levels, white blood cell activity. They help. You want a really large quality colony of beneficial fungi, beneficial bacteria, etc. in your intestines that will break down non-digestible fibers and turn them into vitamins, other hormones, and also, here's the key thing, outcompete the harmful bacteria, viruses, and fungi that make us sick. We all have E. coli on us. We all have staph on us. Everybody carries that. Some people carry MRSA. But the reason it doesn't destroy us is because we have a symbiotic relationship in our intestines and on our skin and everywhere in our body with bacteria that outcompete the harmful bugs. Now, we want to feed that microbiome. We want to keep it healthy, and we want to keep it constantly replenished with good stock, just like any farm or ranch. So what do? We eat fermented foods. That could include sauerkraut, which is what we made. So we just got your regular run-of-the-mill organic green cabbage, chopped it up fine. If you like your cabbage long and stringy, make long slices. If you like it, small, chunky little pieces, you chop it to your desire. And then you add, for every 3 pounds of cabbage, you add a teaspoon of kosher salt. It's not a perfect science. It's okay if you're a little bit off. You don't have to weigh and measure like you're in organic chemistry lab. Nothing's going to blow up. So once you chop the cabbage and you add the kosher salt, you massage it for 10 minutes. You're really trying to break down the fibers inside the cabbage leaves and work that salt into every nook and cranny.
So should I have not used the potato masher?
You used the potato masher?
I did.
Oh, well, it tasted okay, so...
It didn't taste okay. It tasted fantastic.
I guess your confession is okay.
There you go. It's a win-win.
Win-win, yay. So, anyway, adding the salt causes the cabbage to release water. Why? Because plants are made up of lots and lots of little cells. And the membrane of the cell is designed to maintain a balance between the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell of water and sodium and all these other components inside the cell. You want the charges to be equal. Positive and negative ions on both sides need to balance. So when salt is in contact with the cell membrane that you've now meshed up with your massaging, the cell's going to release water to maintain that balance. So water and liquids from inside the cells of the cabbage will start to seep out. And so after 10 minutes of this, you'll get this pretty wet pile of salty cabbage. This is what you want. Then you shove it into the fermentation kit. You can do it in a mason jar without the special water bubble sealer. But, if you have the kit, it's really helpful. So I
got to say, though, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've done sauerkraut in mason jars before.
Yes, we have.
And, you want to talk about turning out okay. that turned out okay. I think that this is phenomenal. I think that there's something about this fermenter kit. It's just different. It was so much more mild and a little bit sweeter than the stuff that we made in the mason jars. The mason jars seemed kind of harsh and bitter to me. Really?
Okay. Well, that's good to know. The thing that was different about this is that it really did create a truly anaerobic environment. So anaerobic versus aerobic. Here's the difference. Anaerobic bacteria do not require oxygen to produce and thrive and multiply and divide. Aerobic bacteria need oxygen. The majority of bacteria that are harmful to humans require oxygen. They're aerobic and they thrive in an aerobic environment where there's air, whereas the bacteria that feed our microbiome and our intestines don't require oxygen because, hey, there's no oxygen floating around in your intestines. There might be a little gas, but, that's methane. So you really want to propagate the healthy, beneficial microbes in an anaerobic environment and really create that happy little place. So those are the bacteria that thrive the best and turn cabbage into sauerkraut. So we let it sit and ferment for 3 weeks, which is pretty typical. 1 week is going to be super mild, still pretty crunchy. 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to get that soft, great texture of sauerkraut that we all know and love on our German sausages. And it's going to have that tang, and it's going to be a little salty, and it was fabulous. So you slow smoked these beer bratwursts on apple wood.
Yeah, it was hot and fast. It was 400 degrees. Pecan wood. Sorry, not apple wood. Pecan wood. Yeah, I like pecan wood. It just, I don't know. It gives this really great flavor.
It's sweet and nutty.
It is. It's sweet and nutty. And you'll notice that there are a lot of top barbecue people in the South that strictly cook with pecan wood.
Yeah, they have a hookup. They have a hookup. It's really, really good. So you did the sausages hot and fast with pecan wood, and then we had our homemade sauerkraut, and then we had some German Dusseldorf mustard.
Oh, and I have to say something really quick about that Acorn Junior grill.
Amazing.
It's like one of we all know the Big Green Egg grills, right? This is the Acorn with a K, and it's their Acorn Junior. So it's the very small one. It's meant for like if you're trying to travel or for just 2 people or whatever. And I have so enjoyed having that because it's like, I don't want to fire up the whole big grill. I don't want to dump a whole thing of charcoal in for 5 sausages that I'm just cooking for you and I.
Yeah, just for dinner.
Yeah, that Acorn Junior. It's not ceramic, it's just double-walled steel, but it still is an incredible grill, and I'm sold on them. I'm seriously sold. And actually, I have something that was sent to me by Tip Top Temp, and I cannot wait to use it. It's going to be so much fun, and you guys are going to find out exactly what I think of it and how it worked. But basically this thing, well, I'll get into it on a different episode, but I encourage you to go and check them out, Tip Top Temp, and see what exactly I'm talking about. But anyways, yeah, the sausages turned out great, and then pairing it with that Dusseldorf mustard that you bought in Leavenworth, Washington, and of course our sauerkraut, it was incredible.
Okay, I have to talk about Leavenworth. Anybody that has never been to a cute little German Bavarian town, Leavenworth is a great place to go if you can't get to Germany. All the buildings are done in a Bavarian style, and they have great German food. And I happened to be there during the International Accordion Festival.
Incredible.
In fact, one of my clients was there playing right when I was coming out of the, are you ready for it, Nutcracker Museum. It cracked me up. Ha ha ha. Anyway, it was really cool. Who knew there was a Nutcracker Museum? This thing was huge. Thousands upon thousands of different nutcrackers from all over the world, depending on what kind of nut is prevalent in that country. These nutcrackers have evolved over time specifically for that. The betel nut from India is one. Hazelnuts in Italy is another. Pecans here in America, walnuts, etc. All of those different nuts have influenced the evolution of specific styles of nutcrackers. I learned so much. Who knew? It was really, really interesting. So
if I curated that place, by the way,
you would be laughing all the time.
Well, first of all, I'd have a huge sign out front that says, we have the oldest recorded nutcracker on the face of the planet. And then when people came to that case, it would just be a rock.
Actually, that's what they had.
Yes. These are my people. Yes.
It was this really great German lady, full getup, helped us up. She was awesome. But yes, they have some very old Paleolithic nutcrackers with these depressions worn in that perfectly fit nut that was prevalent in that area at that time. Just like the stones that were used by Native Americans to grind corn, that you can see the imprints of the Indians' hands in these grinding stones. Same thing with these nutcracker stones.
That's pretty insane.
It was cool.
It really is.
Some of these are thousands of years old from Egypt, India, China. It was amazing.
Wow. Okay, we're getting off in the weeds here, but what we really wanted to talk about today was French cheeses, right?
Right.
Charles Duque from the French Cheese Board was kind enough to send us a sampling of his cheeses and come on the show. We're going to be talking to him here in just a couple of minutes, but it was a very fascinating conversation. You know, there's so much that goes into cheese and how they make their cheese and the heritage and the region and the naming structure. And, you know, I used to think that wine was the only one that did that. You know, they were very particular about this wine is called this because it's grown in this region. And if it's not grown in this region, it can't be that wine, right?
Cheese is the same way.
Cheese is the same way.
Especially in France.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And really, you know, we do it with like whiskey and beer and stuff here in the United States as well. Germany, as a matter of fact, does it with beers. I forget what the German translation is, but it's basically purity laws is what they call it for the beers.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating way to look at this stuff. And so I'm really excited to have you guys listen to that interview. Let's go ahead and cue that up now, and we'll meet you on the back end. I've got Charles Duque on the phone. How are you doing, my friend?
Hello, Andy. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Charles Duque. I'm the director of the French Dairy Board for the Americas. And today I'm here representing Cheeses of Europe, which is a EU co-finance campaign. So it's partly financed by the French Dairy Board and partly by the European Union to raise awareness on French cheeses and European cheeses.
Is there anything better than a good cheese?
A cheese board with multiple cheeses.
Now you're talking, yes.
Yeah.
I have to just run through your background real quick, my friend, because your bio is incredible. Do you actually speak 4 languages?
Yes, I do, yes. And I manage several campaigns for the Cheeses of Europe throughout northern Latin America as well. So Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, the U.S., and I just finished a RFP responding to a request to manage some campaigns in Argentina and Chile. So, it's speaking about cheese in 4 different languages, so Portuguese, French, English, and Spanish.
That is incredible, my friend. And honestly, I'm going to say that you speak 5 languages because I think cheese is a language all its own.
Cheese is a language on its own. There's a lot to cover, and France alone has over 1,200 cheeses. So yeah, there is a language to its own, be it from the scientific point of view to the gustatory point of view to organizing a great cheese board, which I think we'll cover today. So there's definitely a language of taste, of presentation, of terroir, knowledge, savoir-faire, all these wonderful words that describe cheese. But also we could talk about those terms for wine, for chocolate, for teas. So it's in that universe of food.
Most definitely. Food is a language, and then there's almost like internal dialects, as you start getting into the different meats, the different wines, the different cheeses. And you guys sent us this incredible collection of cheeses that we just had so much fun tasting and pairing with some local wines. And we had a lot of fun with the mimolette, my friend. I don't know if I've ever had that before, but that is one that really took us by surprise. Yeah,
mimolette is definitely a crowd favorite. It's a 5-pound ball, which looks like a cannonball from when it's whole. And inside it has a beautiful orange hue to it, which is done by adding annatto to the milk once the process starts. So that cheese is created up in northern France. It then gets put into caving. It caves to age. And then within the caves, there's natural cheese mites. And the cheese mites are there they kind of gnaw away at the rind and they bring air into the cheese, and that helps it to mature and also to give it its flavors.
That is so fascinating. You know, we talk a lot about different cheeses. Blue cheese is the same way. It actually is injected in multiple locations with the mold. And then as it develops inside, you know, it's got those channels, and that's what gives it that beautiful blue color. And it's just such a fascinating science. And it's odd to think that we've been doing it for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years.
Yes, definitely. I mean, cheese is not something new, and I think it was probably created by accident when some person from, you know, prehistoric times was carrying some liquid milk inside maybe a cow or a calf's stomach, and it started to curdle, and then that's when they discovered that it had these properties, and then from there, obviously, you know, with simple ingredients, because it's all made out of, you know, milk from either a cow or a ewe or a goat, etc. And then by adding different molds, putting it in different temperatures at different humidities, you can create, you know, thousands of different types of cheeses.
And with all kinds of different milk too. Mostly
all cow's milk, to be honest with you. Then, as far as production in general, taking away the PDO factor, 96% of production is cow's milk. And then there's a very small percent of goat's milk and an even smaller percent of sheep's milk.
Got it. Okay.
In general, yeah. And then as far as PDOs are concerned, we have, you know, France has 50 PDOs, 45 cheeses, 3 butters, and 2 creams. So do you know what a PDO is?
For the listeners.
Now you do, yeah. For the listeners, yeah. For the listeners, it means protected designation of origin. So it is products that are produced in a certain area, following very strict regulations. So, for instance, let's take. I think you tasted the Bleu d'Auvergne. So that blue cheese, it comes from a certain area in Auvergne, which is a region in central France. It used to be a very volcanic region at one point. Now that all the volcanoes are extinct, but the soil is very rich in minerals and whatnot, and so it gives great pasture land. There's great pasture land in that area where the cows graze on, and so all that is imparted into the milk. And there's a particular breed of cow that is used to make that cheese. It can only be produced in a certain area, and the recipe has to be followed to the T in order for it to benefit from this PDO status. Having a PDO status elevates this product because it is something that is special, that comes from only that area. So it gives it an authenticity and a guarantee of flavor that you can't find anywhere else. It's also very important, I think, to highlight the fact that the people that craft this cheese, they benefit from it because it's one of the bigger industries in the area. So it really helps the local, you know, communities to live and to make a living.
Oh, yeah, most certainly. And it's interesting how, you know, we think about that with wine, right? Champagne, to be a champagne, it can really only come from that region of France. And
correct. Tequila
is the same way. And even bourbon has some of the regulations like that. And you don't really think about it with cheese, but it does make sense.
Yeah. And you know, I think more and more countries are developing those types of, I don't want to call regulations, let's say, to give value to the products that are produced in their regions. The Europeans are really pushing that through several trade treaties that are going on, and that is a big sticking point for the treaties. You know, to be able for other countries to recognize those names and those appellations and to respect them and not use those denominations elsewhere. And now, you know, like you mentioned, Mexico is starting to do that as well, and hopefully we'll start soon.
Yes, exactly. And I think there is a certain retention of heritage there as well. I think that part of that is just people want to make sure that it's being made the way it's supposed to be made. Am I wrong?
No, that's absolutely right. The way it's made and the way it's been made for generations. So they want to keep that alive and well in their communities.
Yes, absolutely. When you have something like that really an area has kind of not just hung their hat on, but lived their lives with, and really kind of incorporated the whole idea of it into their being. It's very important to them, and it's very important to retain the history and the tradition of doing it that way.
Yes. And, and certain cheeses have disappeared because there has, there's been a lack of people taking over that certain industries. It happened a lot after the wars, for instance. But some of them have come back. Époisse is a good example. That was almost, it disappeared for a while, and then I believe actually a team of women started making it again, and it came back to life. So it's now one of the symbols of French cheeses.
That is really fascinating. And how important is it for, I don't know, let's say a specific cheese to be picking up a specific microculture? You talked about aging cheese in a certain cave or a certain area, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously the mold is going to change the flavor of the cheese, right? Right.
So different molds are used in different ways, and different molds grow in different temperatures, different levels of humidity, different atmospheres in general. So it depends if, for example, when you take a brie, that's a mold that's going to be an external mold that's going to cover the paste. So it's a white, fluffy mold called Penicillium candidum, and that one goes around the cheese, and it could be sprayed on in the atmosphere of the aging facility or where it's being aged at the time. It could also be sprayed directly onto the cheese. Other cheeses, for instance, a famous blue cheese in France called Roquefort, the paste arrives, white. It's been pierced. It's pierced with these metal rods, which allow air to come into the mold, and then the mold comes into the cheese and grows within the paste, and it gives it those beautiful blue-green veins that we see when we cut into it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then what's happening with, I know this is a little change of where we're going here, so I apologize ahead of time, but you guys sent me some, and hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly, Emmental cheese?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, at first glance, it does look like a Swiss cheese, but then when you taste it, it's not Swiss. It is mild, but it's definitely not a Swiss cheese, quote unquote. It has a very kind of a robust underlying flavor. I found it pair really well with a Cabernet, which is not something you normally have with like a Swiss cheese.
Right. Well, Emmental is, I think the generic term Swiss cheese that we use here in the United States refers to a light yellow cheese with holes in it. And this is a big wheel of cheese. It's made in either in the eastern part of France, towards Switzerland and whatnot, or if not, there's also a big production facilities going on in Brittany. So it's a large wheel. When you cut into it, it has holes. The holes happen because of the bacteria that is part of the milk itself. So the bacteria release gases, and these gases explode within the cheese, and so it creates these eyes, what they're called eyes. And when you cut into them, well, you actually see them, and they're a big part of the aspect of the cheese. And then I think the addition of this bacteria also gives it that flavor. So it has a fruity flavor to it. It has a little bit of acidity to it, which is a much stronger flavor than what we're used to here when we talk about quote unquote Swiss cheese.
Most definitely.
Which is pretty bland.
Yes, exactly. That's the first thing that we noticed about the Emmental. It was very good. It was very rich, lots of flavor, lots of kind of that creamy flavor. It was more creamy than I had anticipated. Not a creamy mouthfeel, but it just kind of had that reminiscent of a nice heavy cream. I absolutely loved it.
Lactic.
We all loved it.
A lactic flavor to it, yeah.
There you go, a lactic flavor.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking to the cheese expert, folks. You're expanding my vocabulary here, my friend. Let's talk a little bit about the cheese plate, the assortment that you'd put out in front of someone. You, of course, sent us a few things which I want to pass on to our listeners, and I really enjoyed reading that. And so the tasting profile goes, as you would expect, mild to strong, clockwise around a cheese platter. What would be your, let's call it your perfect cheese plate, if you could have anything from any region and put it on a plate?
Well, I think, what we sent you was a good example of nice cheeses that you can include into a cheese board. So we sent you a brie, triple creme, an Emmental, mimolette, and bleu d'Auvergne. So these are some of the cheeses we've talked about already. We wanted to show you different textures, different colors, and I think we definitely did that. We sent you some milder cheeses like the brie, and we went all the way to the strongest cheese, which is the bleu. So the idea in France is to be able to serve usually odd-numbered cheeses, which is why we sent you 5. And then you can choose a board depending on what you like. You can use slate, you can use wood, you can use, why not plastic? I mean, it really depends on what you have on hand. And then to place them on the board, like you mentioned, clockwise from mildest to strongest. So in this case, we would start off with the brie, let's say at noon, if you're looking at it as a clock. And then you would put triple creme at 1 o'clock, Emmental maybe at 4, the mimolette at 7, and the bleu d'Auvergne at 10. And that way you have an order that people can follow. Then you want to add maybe crackers or a thin slice of baguette, fruit, honey, jams, things like that people could add to the cheeses to make them a little, more interesting if they like to, or maybe they find the blue too strong, so a little bit of honey really does the trick. So there's a lot of ways to dress up the board, and it really depends on who you're hosting, what you have on hand, things like that. But my one advice is to take the cheese out of the refrigerator at least 30 to 40 minutes before you're serving it, so it reaches room temperature. And that way you really get all the aromas and the textures that you want, because something that's too cold, usually, you really can't taste as much. So that's important to keep in mind.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really, really good point. Yeah, taking that out and letting it reach a little bit of a temperature, because if it hits your mouth cold, you're not going to get nearly as much of the flavor and all of the things going on. In the case of the blue cheese, the funk, which, by the way, was very mild. I was actually very impressed by the blue cheese that you guys sent us. It was not as heavy a blue flavor as I was expecting. Right, and that's because it's a cow's milk blue. And that makes all the difference. Cow's milk is it's creamier, it's milder. So, blues in general that are made with cow's milk are going to be much more palatable than, let's say, a Roquefort, which is done with sheep's milk. And that sheep's milk gives it that further kick. So that's why a lot of people, when they think of blue cheese, they automatically think of Roquefort, but there's definitely milder examples. Oh, interesting. That is very interesting. I didn't know that. So you have Fourme d'Ambert, you have Bleu d'Auvergne, you have Saint-Agour, you have several blue cheeses that are made with cow's milk, and then for people who find that too strong, a little bit of honey really does it changes the entire mouthfeel. You could also serve it with some sweet jams, or even with a nice sweet wine like Sauterne, or that also works. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm going a little bit off topic here. I apologize, but we talk a lot about how food is starting to get more localized. We've got a lot of the monoculture happening in the United States, where things are being made on this huge scale. And I would like to see the U.S. start scaling back and adopting some of the things like a PDO. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think there is a movement in that direction here as well. There's a lot of artisan cheesemakers that are doing excellent things and making excellent products. And you can see these people. I mean, I see them at, for instance, the American Cheese Society, which is a big event that takes place once a year, and it's a time where everybody gets to meet everybody else and see what's going on in the industry. And Europe and France support them, wholeheartedly, because we want to see the whole category of artisan cheeses go, rise and grow. So for us, it's very important to support them. So yeah, it is happening here as well, and it's been happening, I'd say, for the past, since the 70s, I'd say it started, and now you can find a lot of these artisan American cheeses in the market for the past, I would say, 20 years, and the list keeps growing every year. And I just love to see that. It's not just bringing a diversity, but it's bringing more awareness to your food and more awareness to what you're eating. I think American cheese is probably one of the worst things to happen to us as a culture.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it. It's something where when you have something that has a long shelf life and it's very stable to ship and all of that stuff, you're not necessarily going to have the highest, I don't know if I should say quality, but the flavor is not going to be quite as complex, shall we say?
No, I mean, it's something that's not that natural, and things like that are edible shouldn't last that long. But, I think it has to do a lot with history. It has to do, where all these things come from, how they originated, where they're coming from. So, and now we've grown as a culture. Our palates have developed, and I think we're starting to go in the right direction. At least, a good part of the population is starting to realize that it's important to eat healthy, to eat well, to enjoy what you're eating, to take the time. And these are all things that have been happening in Europe for forever. So they really appreciate these products. They really appreciate taking the time to share them with their friends and family, which is, what we like to talk about when we're talking about a cheese plate or any type of product. It's always about sharing. It's always about having people discover something new.
Boy, that is so true. And speaking of sharing cheeses, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, let's say a person is going to have a big party and they're looking to not just put their cheese plate together, but they're also looking to cut it themselves. There are some very specific ways that some of these cheeses need to be cut. Is that right?
Yes, there is a science behind that as well. And the reason is very simple. Cheese has a rind, and most of the rinds are edible. Which is the case in soft ripened cheeses like brie and camembert, blue cheeses. Hard cheeses have a very thin rind, which is edible as well. So in most cases, you could eat the rind. And here, for some reason, people have a tendency to scoop out the paste and leave the rind. And I've been to several parties where I always see a camembert that's just, it's flat because everybody scooped everything out and the rind is just kind of there, and it's a shame. Why is the rind important? Because the rind brings texture and flavor. So the whole science behind cutting it correctly is to be able to give everybody a piece of paste and a piece of rind so they can savor it to its full potential.
Okay, so real quick before we go into the different kinds of cheeses and how we cut them, I'm curious now how you feel about like a baked brie, because more often than not with a baked brie, you're supposed to cut the top off either before or after baking it, and then it becomes like a soft, warm cheese that you dip in. Is there a better way of tackling something like that?
I mean, that recipe is it's a great recipe to make a great dip. And it's the reason you cut the top of the rind is just to give it access to melt better and for people to be able to dip their chip or whatever, their cracker in there. So, but I'm talking about just fresh cheese that you're taking out of the refrigerator and that you're cutting for your guests or for yourself as a snack. And you want to be able to taste the rind, because the rind, for example, in brie has those wonderful mushroomy flavors and adds a texture in your mouth that's interesting, and the whole is what makes the cheese delicious, not just the paste inside.
Hey, you heard it here, folks. This is not me telling you. This is a cheese expert telling you. You have got to eat the rind with that brie. It's part of it.
It's part of it.
Okay, so we are talking about cutting different cheeses, and you sent me this handy chart, which I just am in love with. I've been looking at it, and I tried to follow it very closely when we were tasting the cheeses that you sent us. And you've got things like a round cheese, but something that is smaller-ish, I would assume. But when you start looking at things like a large cheese round that you're going to take a wedge out of, and then that wedge has kind of a specific way that it needs to be cut. And I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, this is the first two examples here. We're talking about a round cheese, which would be like a camembert. So we're talking about an 8.8 ounce round. The next one, let's say the brie point, is a 3 kilo brie that's been cut. So you have a large wedge, and so you want to cut the point off first. You want to cut another piece that's perpendicular to that. And then the rest of the cheese gets cut accordingly too, so everybody has a piece of rind and paste. And that's the idea behind that. Several cheeses that have odd shapes like pyramids or heart-shaped, they have their own way of being cut. And there's obviously tools for each type of cheese as well, so different knives for different cheeses.
A pyramid-shaped cheese or a square cheese versus a round cheese, is that being done more for aesthetic reasons, or is there a science behind that as well?
Well, the pyramid and square, the science is, again, to keep part of the rind. But obviously, I think a cheese board is very visual as well. And the French are very particular about how things are displayed, and they have a knack for presenting everything with a French flair, we'll say. And it looks very pretty, very appetizing. And obviously, that's also part of displaying a nice cheese board.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Charles, this has been absolutely fascinating, my friend. I have a lot of thinking to do now. You've really changed the way I'm going to approach cheese from here on out.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in. And where can people find you and everything you have going on?
So the Cheeses of Europe has a website called cheesesofeurope.com. There's also a handy phone app that's available on the either Android or Apple stores. And that app is very handy because it helps you not only to discover the wide variety of cheeses from Europe, but also how to pronounce the names. And that's, I think, also something we didn't touch on, but a lot of people don't know how to say the names, and they feel intimidated by, going to the cheese store or even going to, the cheese counter and asking for these cheeses by name because they don't know how to say them. So that's one of our big barriers when it comes to these European cheeses that have very particular names. So that app helps you, pronounce the names. It also has over, I believe, 20,000 locations around the country, so you can find the cheese, close to your home. And on the website, you can find, a lot of information, recipes. There are some funny videos there as well that we've produced here. And then we also are the sponsor of the U.S. Open Series this summer. So we'll be, if any of your listeners are going to follow tennis, we'll be in Cincinnati. We'll be out in on the West Coast near San Francisco. We'll be in Atlanta. We'll be in Winston-Salem sampling these products. So, if you're out there, please come say hello. Also, we do over 500 in-store demos in major supermarkets around the country. And same thing, if you see us, please come over, say hello, taste these cheeses. And I'm sure that, once you taste them, you fall in love with them.
How can you not? You guys, make sure you're going and checking that out. We will have links to everything that Charles is talking about underneath of this episode on pardonmyfork.com/podcast. Charles, once again, thank you so much, my friend, and hopefully we talk again soon.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me, and I am always here ready to continue the conversation.
Oh my gosh, he speaks 4 languages plus cheese. So like 5 languages. That's really impressive.
Oh, man.
We were talking earlier about microbes and how important they are in our own bodies to keep us healthy and protect us. But microbes are also so important in creating amazing foods.
Mm-hmm.
And every single cheese that we had is directly related to a specific microbe that is nurtured and also isolated in a specific region so that each area in France has its own recognized uniqueness that they can then put a stamp on and put a number and say, this product came from this region. And it's clearly defined what you can expect from that region and that product. And it's a really unique way that France has developed to protect its farmers and its cheese producers to, keep their economy going and help them support their families. And I respect that. And it all comes down to microbes.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And they do that it was like I was talking about with Charles. They do it with cheese. They do it with wine. They do it with a lot of different things. The whole idea of the protected designation of origin, it really kind of helps you. You can't copyright a food or recipe, right?
No.
But this allows you to have some kind of control over the end product.
Well, so for example, there's 2 different types of brie out there. One brie is going to be very large with a pale rind, and one brie is going to be smaller with a darker rind, more hazelnutty. And if you sequence the DNA of the microbe in that cheese, they will be unique and specific. So you can tell exactly what microbe caused that cheese to taste and look the way that it does. I thought that was really interesting. The brie that they sent us, the brie fromage, it comes from the northeast part of France. And it was really smooth. You know, when I was tasting this, you know, you try to go through all your scents. So what does it look like? It was a pale, creamy, bloomed cheese. It wasn't the darker brie that's going to be a bit heavier. In terms of its aroma, it was definitely a little bit stronger than some of the watered down bries that we get in America that are made here with, you know, your President brie that everybody gets at Safeway. This was a little bit more robust. So I was getting initially flavors of like a mushroom asparagus going on. And it finishes off with like that peppery bite you get in a radish, really specific. And I feel like it would pair well with raw oysters, but I love raw oysters. So that's just me.
Interesting. Okay.
The wine that I liked best with it was a dry brut, a sparkling dry white wine that was very much in contrast to the buttery flavors and that vegetal funk quality in this brie.
And actually, I should apologize in advance to the listeners because I should have gotten a photo of this whole lineup that Corianne did for us. She has this incredible palette that I'm always talking about on the show, but she was able to really let that shine through. When we opened, we had, 7 bottles of wine open because we were going through and like tasting and trying to see what paired with what. And man, we were just having the best time.
We had a good time. You know, the other thing that kind of surprised me, I was also trying to think, okay, if you're not a wine person, which we have family that are not, they're more cider people or beer people. So if you were going to recommend a beer to go with a brie, I would do something bready, like Hefeweizen. Because what do you often serve brie cheese with? Warm French bread.
Right.
A baguette. So you want something that's bready and heavy. So definitely a Hefeweizen with that really bready wheat forward flavor. Also, in contrast, would be a farmhouse ale or a sour ale that uses the Brettanomyces yeast. Because then you're going to get that sour component and finish off with like a pie crust flavor. So I thought this would be good, like if you paired it with a pêche, which is going to have a peach flavor, like a peach crumble kind of a flavor to it.
But very bready on the back end.
Very bready.
Almost like sometimes they can taste like peach jam on a saltine to me.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the Brettanomyces yeast. That's the component that yeast will bring to it. And I feel like that'll complement it. I mean, you could definitely go with the nice buttery, oaky Chardonnay because that would complement the buttery texture in the brie. But that was what I got on that brie. But again, that microbe is unique to this brie, to this region in Northeast France. They gave us a triple cream brie that was a little bit more mild, super creamy. It was your nephew's favorite.
And it was so mild and so smooth, too. I could not believe how soft it was. It was beyond cream cheese. I mean, it was just like scoop it out with a spoon.
Yes, it was delicious and divine. I really wanted to have it on a warm, like, farmhouse bread.
You know what it reminded me of look-wise? This is how unsophisticated I am. It looked like vanilla pudding to me.
It did, yeah.
It just kind of had that color that you get when you're making like a French vanilla pudding.
It definitely had a vanilla flavor to it, vanilla look to it. It was super creamy. I got a lot of toasted pecan on it. You know, and this is where I got a little waffly on it. Would it go like not quite pecan, more sunflower seeds? Like the difference between pecans and sunflower seeds is they're both a soft nut, but there's a different texture. You know, it's really super unique. We've been into hemp seeds, and whole hemp seeds are really good in a broccoli salad. Just a side note. And I feel like that triple cream on French bread with broccoli salad would be really delicious. Of course, I would definitely serve that with champagne. Not really dry champagne, something a little bit sweeter to kind of go with that desserty creaminess of this cheese. Super good cheese, dessert cheese.
We might have to get some more of that once our figs are ripe, by the way.
That would be a really good cheese with figs and honey.
So.
Okay. The mimolette was your favorite. Now, the mimolette was one neither of us had ever had before.
No, it was brand new to me.
It was brand new to us. It looked like a dry cheddar from Tillamook. Okay. So super orange, like a super, super ripe cantaloupe. And it actually had kind of a gray cantaloupe rind on the outside. And the rind on the mimolette is directly related to the cheese mites in the caves where they age this cheese. Again, that specific designation of where the cheese comes from is unique to the type of milk, in this case, cow's milk, where those cows are grown, what they're fed, how the cheese is processed, and how it's aged. It all is region specific, and it's detailed. So you can't deviate from that if you want to call a particular cheese a mimolette. And the longer the mimolette ages, the harder it gets and the more toasty, nutty it gets.
And now the firmness, that's pretty universal, isn't it?
No, the older the cheese, the more firm the cheese.
Right, exactly.
Of the mimolette. Yeah.
But isn't that most cheese? Don't you age cheese longer? Like the longer you age it, the firmer it gets?
Again, it depends on the microbe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the longer you age a brie, it's not going to get firm.
No, that's a good point.
It's going to get gooey.
Mm-hmm.
So the mimolette, it's going to get firmer the older it is. So usually we'll age it up to 24 months. The wine I liked best with this was a local Sauvignon Blanc from the Willamette Valley, but it could also go with a Pinot. Now, Pinot Noir is a more mild red wine. It's not going to be like a Merlot or a Cabernet or a Zinfandel. This lighter Pinot paired really well with this mimolette.
And of course, some Pinots are lighter than others because I'm sitting here, we're actually drinking a Pinot from Sass. It's a 2015 Sass Pinot Noir from the Wild Winds Vineyard. And I'm just sipping on this and I'm thinking back to that mimolette and I'm thinking, I'm not sure this would go. But I think you're right. If we had something that was a little milder, because it's pretty big for a Pinot, this one.
This is big and thick for a Pinot. The one that really surprised me that was my personal favorite was the Bleu d'Auvergne. So, of course, it comes from the Auvergne region of France, which is a really classic word that's thrown around in wine culture. But I don't know if everybody knows that with cheese culture. So it's right in like south central France, like pretty close to the middle. Now, this cheese has been around for 150 years. So mid 1850s is when the blue mold for this cheese was developed by chemist somewhere mid-France, bored, too much time in his hands. But
probably trying to kill somebody.
Yeah, it's really aromatic. Very strong aromatic flavors and smells. The aromatic flavors I got on this particular cheese was kind of like a rosemary. And then it definitely had like a buttered toast flavor, which I was super surprised. So I'm like smelling rosemary, thinking walnuts, tasting toast. And I was like, whoa, what is going on with this? But I wanted to take this cheese and do like a buffalo blue cheese stuffed portobello mushroom. I loved this with a Cabernet, but I also think a sweet rosé would complement the more aromatic qualities. Here was my wild card, dark ales. A dark ale would go well. Something more syrupy, like a really strong stout or porter.
Well, I'm pretty sure I was drinking a New Holland's Dragon Milk that night. And so, yeah, looking back on it, I think you're right.
Dragon's Milk would go really well with this Bleu d'Auvergne. You know, that's a sentence I don't think I'd ever say it again. A dragon's milk would go very well with a Bleu d'Auvergne.
All right, well, but moving on to the Emmental cheese.
Oh, the Emmental cheese.
That was, if that wasn't your favorite, that was definitely your second favorite because you were slicing off chunks of that and taking it to work.
Yeah, that was a wild card for me. I was like, they're throwing Swiss cheese in on this? What's going on here? But it wasn't your super strong Swiss like you'd have with your turkey and Swiss on rye or your pastrami. This Emmental was really mild, but it did finish with sort of that lactic acid flavor at the end. It's from Eastern France. So a little bit more towards Switzerland. Okay. So that's probably why it was really common. I do think this would go great with pastrami, but, you know, I've got a lot of family in New York, so pastrami is really near and dear to my heart.
Did we melt that cheese, speaking of?
We did it with ham.
Oh, we did it with ham.
Yeah, we made a country ham, and we did a ham and Emmental sandwich. We didn't have any rye. I'd really like to try this on a seedless rye, but the Emmental cheese was delicious. Had really great eyes. The holes in the cheese called the eye, those are really nicely formed. They weren't too large. It's not like you're cutting into this cheese and like 2/3 of it's just holes going, hey, what's up? Where's my cheese?
Right.
It was a great medium firm cheese. And I would recommend Emmental to anybody. And I would also try the mimolette instead of cheddar and really see if you can take your taste buds to a new level.
I dig it. I'm actually with you. I think shaking it up, trying some of these different cheeses and just play with them and just have fun and see if you can expand your palate and taste something new. Matter of fact, if you are ever in New York City, you are going to have to swing by French Cheese Board. And the next time we're in New York, I definitely want to put that on my list. And I'll tell you what, hon, we got to wrap this up, but I want to say huge thanks to Charles Duque. We're going to have all of the associated stuff about where to find him and information about PDO cheeses and even how to cut your cheeses. We're going to have all that linked on pardonmyfork.com/podcast. This is going to be the latest episode at the top. The same place you're going to find all of the previous episodes as well, so I encourage you to go and check that out. And we've got the new show, Barrel Aged, that's coming up real soon. I'm getting super excited about it. We're getting ready to start launching the social media and stuff like that, and so I'll be putting out some links where you can find that and follow it. And I want to thank our fine sponsors over at Gem City Fine Foods, gluten-free, nut-free, in some cases dairy-free and vegan desserts that are to die for. You have never had anything like this before. It is the most delicious, the most moist. If you have a gluten allergy, celiacs, or you're catering to someone else's special needs, Gem City Fine Foods is the way to go. Find them at gemcityfinefoods.com. I thank you for tuning in, and I thank you for telling a friend, by the way. You guys are what keeps us afloat, and we really do appreciate that. And I want to thank my special co-host today, Corianne. Thanks for being here.
It's been a pleasure, baby.
So until next time, for Charles and Corianne, this is Andy, and we will see you next time.